Everybody wants to purchase inventory and sell it the same day. Having a high inventory turnover is a good thing, but what happens if the inventory does not turn over efficiently? In this lecture, we will discuss what happens to inventory as it ages. One of the main issues of aging inventory is that as time passes along, most inventory will lose some value. As a reminder, there are two basic types of inventory: cycle stock and safety stock. Cycle stock is the inventory that is used to fill demand. As orders are filled, the cycle stock depletes and it must be replenished. To protect against stockouts and increases in demand, many organizations hold what is known as safety stock. This additional inventory helps buffer and protect an organization against unexpected changes, namely increases in demand. While safety stock is a buffer, cycle stock is the normal inventory that a company uses, often called operating inventory or regular inventory. So, what happens when operating inventory is not used up by the end of a cycle? It then becomes excess inventory. The Apex Dictionary 16th edition defines excess inventory as any inventory in the system that exceeds the minimum amount necessary to achieve the desired throughput rate at the constraint, or that exceeds the minimum amount necessary to achieve the desired due date performance. Total inventory equals productive inventory plus protective inventory plus excess inventory. Another way of defining excess inventory is any inventory that has not been sold and that exceeds the projected consumer demand for that product. Excess inventory occurs for a variety of reasons. Some include bad forecasting and predictions, anticipated demand that never occurred, poor inventory management systems, canceled orders, failure to manage the obsolete inventory, lot size purchases to achieve price breaks, long lead times, and sudden shifts in supply and demand. Now, you may be thinking, no big deal, it will be sold eventually. However, excess inventory translates into increased storage costs, lost profits, perishable and deteriorating inventory, loss of inventory investments, loss of time in managing the inventory, and an overall increased risk of your inventory. So, how do companies fix the problem of excess inventory? When excess inventory occurs, most organizations are forced into pushing sales rather than pulling them to demand. This typically involves discounting inventory at rates that will sell quickly in an effort to regain whatever investments have been made, donating the inventory to a local charity, and in extreme cases, companies will find more benefit in zeroing out the excess and simply giving it away or scrapping it out. Keep in mind that managing inventory and building to demand with strategies like Lean is the ideal. Whatever the method, you must try and recoup some of your investment, or it could really become a major problem. So, what happens if excess inventory sits on shelves for too long? Excess inventory that does not move or get used up becomes what is known as inactive inventory. Inactive inventory is any excess inventory that has been sitting for a defined period of time. For example, if a piece of stock has not been used for a predetermined amount of time, it could be deemed inactive by the organization. This happens quite often with tools that are not used for a long period of time, components that are not used, and excess finished goods that were bought in large lots for price breaks. So, what do you do with inactive inventory? First and foremost, you must try to recover your investment if possible. Liquidation sales may be one way, recycling materials, or if need be, zero the inactive inventory out and write it off against net profits. We must remember that inventory is an asset, and yet inactive inventory does not generate a profit, which means your assets are tied up in the form of inactive inventory. In addition, this inactive inventory has carrying costs associated with it, material costs, and many others that accumulate more costs. This is why it is oftentimes much more beneficial for an organization to zero the assets that are inactive and use them as a write-off. Keep in mind that all inventory, especially inactive inventory, carries a huge risk of becoming distressed inventory, also known as distressed goods or services. Distressed goods or services are products, services, or even information that are either damaged, at risk of not being sold in a defined time, or close to expiration. Most of these distressed inventory items cannot be sold at full value. Here's an example. Grocery stores sell many perishable goods that are marked with either sell-by dates or expiration dates. When these dates are nearing, your inventory may be at risk of becoming a distressed good. Another example might be concert tickets. If the concert ticket is nearing the performance day and the tickets have not been sold, they may be considered distressed tickets. Last but not least, damaged items. When items are damaged in inventory, they become a distressed good. All of these damaged or near expiration items usually need to be heavily discounted to sell. Now, once your inventory is inactive, it is dead, right? No. Inactive inventory still has some options. However, if inactive inventory is not converted in some way, it will eventually become obsolete or dead inventory. Dead stock, also known as dead inventory or obsolete inventory, refers to items that aren't expected to sell. Typically, if an organization has decided that the inventory is not expected to sell and it is obsolete, the items, services, or information has met some obsolescence criteria that has been established by the organization. Here is an example. If a company makes a product and the inventory is superseded with a new design or model, the old inventory is now considered obsolete. There are a few ways you can deal with obsolete inventory. Some organizations may be able to offload older models at a reduced cost, or many organizations will simply dispose of the obsolete inventory or write the obsolete inventory off. This will reduce assets on hand, which in turn reduces an organization's profit margin. As you can tell, disposing of obsolete inventory is not free. There are disposal fees, lost investments, and time incurred to properly dispose of obsolete items. As such, all organizations should make it a priority to reduce the amount of inventory that becomes obsolete and manage their inventory in such a way that investments yield positive returns for all parties involved. One more thing to note about obsolescence that you must be aware of is items that have surpassed the length of time for which an item remains usable, fit for consumption, or saleable. Most of these items must be disposed of. However, the shelf life, if made visible and trackable, can be a way to monitor items so they do not become obsolete. There is one more phase that occurs when inventory ages, the scrap phase. By definition, scrap is any material or information that is left over and cannot be used outside of specifications and not be reworkable or simply bad. In short, scrap items must be disposed of. They are not reworkable. Materials or information that are scrap cannot be returned to inventory. Here's an example. Let's say you are building a product and your cut is incorrect and it cannot be reworked. This product is now defective and must be scrapped out. Another example might be information that is generated. Let's say a report that is written and printed out. Somewhere in the text, the material contains a mistake. This batch of printout information is now defective and you must scrap it out. With that being said, scrap materials or information are caused by many different factors. Some include procedural errors, mistakes, bad materials, processes that are not effective, and machines that are not up to standard. There are many reasons inventory might need to be scrapped, but the one commonality of all scrap is that you should avoid it. Remember, scrap cannot be reworked. It must be scrapped out and simply is unfixable. For something to be reworked, it needs to be fixable, correctable, or reprocessed to salvage or bring the defective item or information back into an acceptable form. Okay, that's a lot to take in. Let's summarize. Inventory begins in an operational condition, and if left over for a defined period of time, becomes excess inventory. At some point in time, the inventory will then become inactive and quite possibly could later be deemed obsolete. Last but not least, inventory is scrapped. As you can tell, these 5 phases of inventory value is lost as time passes by. This is why it is so important to keep that turnover high and only carry what you need. You now know what happens to inventory as it ages. Before we go, comment below, do you have any inactive or obsolete inventory on hand? If so, have you thought about a 5S project? We look forward to interacting as a community and helping you find solutions that ignite your power. See you soon.